Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you my brand new curriculum for Copywork and Dictation that's geared towards the Muslim child, but it's for everyone. There are 3 levels. Level 1 starts at about 1st to 3rd grade. I've got a range of grades on here because it can work for any one of those grades. Level 2 works for grades 2 through 4th grade, and level 3 works for grades 3rd through 5th. And this is an opportunity for you to use your fountain pen with this level. Now, this Copywork and Dictation goes through the 99 names of Allah. I'm going to walk you through each of the levels so that you can find the right level for you and your child, and each level comes with a teacher's manual included to make it easier for you to do the lessons. Okay, so let's start with level 1. Now, all the teacher's manuals are the same in their directions. The difference is in the content for the weekly lessons. So the introduction and the first few pages are going to go through what copywork is and how you can do it with your child and how this curriculum is designed, because there's a lot of repetition in the curriculum, and that is on purpose. Now, these are PDF digital files that you can get downloaded. You can get them anywhere in the world as long as you have access to a computer and internet and the ability to download items onto your computer. So none of this stuff is going to get sent out, which it makes it really easy for you to reuse this year after year, because you can just print out a new set of sheets for however many children you have. Okay, so the teacher's manual goes through the content for that week and it explains how to deliver the lessons. So I'll show you all of the lessons in the student manual, because then it will make this a little bit easier to understand. So it's going to go through all 99 names of Allah using the ayat in the Quran that mention those names. And so not the entire ayah or the verse is used, only portions of the verse are used, especially in level 1. Smaller portions of the verse are used for copywork, whereas by the time you get to level 3, it's much lengthier because the students are older and more capable. Okay, so throughout the introduction, it goes through how to do the lessons, but also it talks about ihsan as well, because we're trying and striving for a job well done, not perfection. There's a different way that we're approaching these lessons. The lessons are very short, sometimes ranging less than 5 minutes, and so we're striving to complete our best work. So sometimes it's a matter of handwriting, sometimes it's a matter of spelling. Whatever you choose the goal for that lesson to be sure to do it well, even if it's only one time. All right, so let's dive into the workbook, and then we can go back to the teacher's manual so that I can explain how we use them together. So the student workbook's going to start right away with the lines, the lined work, as well as the copy work with the sentence and the space for dictation. So the way that this is set up is on a weekly basis. The lessons will be concentrated on one name of Allah and that ayah. So the entire week you're going to be going over that same sentence. And this is how it works. The very first day you're going to have copy work. And so these lines for grade 1, or for level 1 rather, which would work for grades 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade, the lines are a little bit bigger. And if you find that they're a little bit too big for your child to work with a pencil, you can use a thicker pencil or even a color pencil so that you can utilize the lines the way that they're designed. So you're going to get the ayah in the Quran. It tells you the surah number, the ayah number, and it gives you a translation of the Arabic. And then it also gives you the Arabic. This is a little bit more of a print, but the rest of them are going to look a little bit more like calligraphy, which makes it a little bit more difficult to read. And so the Arabic text is also included here for your reference. So the student will write the very first sentence, paying attention closely to the sentence that's given, making sure that everything is spelled correctly, making sure that the punctuation is correct. You can double check once the copy work is done. Usually I find that the students can do this with little assistance. Sometimes I do have to check for punctuation. That's the one thing that my daughter tends to overlook. When you get to day 2 of the same week, you're going to start with dictation. Now, in order to conserve paper and not do each of these lessons on a separate piece of paper, I recommend that you take a scratch piece of paper and cover their previous work so that they can do the dictation. Now, you'll notice that on the following day, there's also going to be the same copy work. So you're going to need to take 2 sheets of paper to cover that work so that they can do the dictation. And that's because you don't want them to see the sentence when they're doing the dictation. That's when you're going to refer to your teacher's manual. And I haven't had these bound yet, but I'm sure you'll get them bound sooner than I can. If you look at the teacher's manual, it's going to go through and explain what to do on day 1 and 3, which are exactly the same. You're going to be doing copy work. So there's not much that the teacher needs to do other than check the work if you feel it's necessary. On day 2 and 4, that's the day that you need to come in and actually do some of the teaching or the participating in the lesson. And that's because you need to recite the sentence for your student. And I give you some directions on how to do that, but you also, in the first pages of the teacher's manual, there's actually a lot more extensive directions on how to do each of the days. And so for the duration of the teacher's manual, it's only just going to be a couple of sentences that explain what to do. So refer back to the intro of the teacher's manual for more explicit directions on how to do the copy work and the dictation for each day, because there's a purpose behind the repetition. There's also a purpose behind doing the dictation following the copy work. And after 4 days of doing this, hopefully, inshallah, your child could do the whole entire sentence from memory. That's what we're striving for. Now, maybe it's less important to memorize it in English. You can choose instead to refer to the Arabic text, the Quran, and memorize those ayat in Arabic if you would like to include the Arabic with the copy work. I'm also having an entire Arabic copywork curriculum made as well using this text. It's being translated by a sister named Arwa, and that's going to be coming very soon. So check the description box below for more information on that if you want this entire curriculum in Arabic. Okay, so on day 2 and 4, you refer back to your teacher's manual. It will explain, or it will detail which sentence you're doing for that week. And all you need to do is recite the sentence. Now, the student isn't supposed to write as you are reciting the sentence. You want to recite the sentence and let that child hold that sentence in his or her mind completely. Then they go and write it. So this is not, you're not saying it word by word. The point for this part is to hold the sentence and visualize it in one's mind before writing it down. Okay, now if your child needs you to repeat it a few times, that's completely fine, especially by the time you get to level 3. Some of these sentences are quite lengthy, some of the words are quite complicated, and so your child may need more time in order to remember or visualize that sentence before writing it down. And oftentimes, especially when the sentences got longer with my students, they would get midway through writing and then they would forget, and I would need to help them and recite the sentence again, or maybe just one word to remind them what the rest of the sentence was. So don't worry if that happens. That's completely normal, and you can just repeat the sentence. What you don't want to do, however, is go word by word and let them write it down. You want to strive for them to start memorizing these short sentences and just strengthen their memory. Once they write down the sentence in the dictation part, what's really important at this point is to have the student refer back to the previous lesson so that they can see the copy work that's been written and correct their own work. So for level 1 and level 2, and even part of level 3, you want it done in pencil so that the child can easily erase and rewrite. We don't want to leave mistakes. We don't want the child to visualize those mistakes and have it become more difficult for them to memorize words or punctuation or grammar rules. We want the child to be looking at a sentence that's well written and well formed so that those become the examples for the student. So if there are any mistakes in dictation, we want to erase them right away. We want the child to erase them right away. We don't want that to get set in their heads. So on the 3rd day, we're going to go back to copywork, and it's the same sentence. Now, in the beginning, it's fairly easy. Your students can get through these lessons very quickly, but they build very quickly, and it will get to be a little bit more complicated as you move through the weeks and as you move through the levels. And so this repetition is going to be really necessary if we're striving for memory by the last day. On day 4, we're going to go back to dictation, and once again, you want to cover your previous work so that you're not, so your child isn't seeing the work that's previously been done. Again, instead of having these each done on a separate page, I left it all on one page. We can just cover as we move along. It does get a little bit shifty with all the paper, and so I actually got some full back sticky Post-its, and I know that they make them in larger sheets, and that way you can just stick it down, and then it's not shifting as the child is writing, which can become a little bit cumbersome. By the time you get to the last day, after 4 days of going through the same sentence, we want our child to strive to write this sentence from memory. We don't want to tell the student the sentence. We want them to write it from memory. Now, in the beginning of the teacher's manual, I talk about guessing, and I talk about trying to avoid the unnecessary guessing or the habit of guessing and really strive for our best work. So if we really don't know something and the child really can't remember, I'd rather that we help the child rather than promote the habit of guessing when a child doesn't know. If a child knows but can't quite remember, make your best effort, but let's move away from saying, well, just take your best guess or just guess. Let's move away from the idea of guessing even when it's your best guess and try to go towards making a best effort. But if you simply don't know, let's also honor that and not shame that the child doesn't know and just help the child out. Because throughout this, we want to also create the good habit of striving for one's best and also avoid the bad habit of guessing unnecessarily. So let me show you a few more pages in level 1 so you can get an idea of how the work gets more challenging as you go through. Now, in each of the weeks, you're going to have one ayah that mentions the name of Allah that we're studying for that week. As we go through level 2 and level 3, I'm going to include more verses for you to look at or even to choose from if you don't want to choose the copy work that I've provided. And also it's an opportunity to dive into those different verses and those surahs so that if you choose to incorporate that into some of your other lessons, you have some references. So you can also see that the Arabic calligraphy can be a little bit difficult and challenging to read. It's there more for beautification and just to have that beauty on your page. The Arabic text is written here as well, so that if you just wanted the Arabic letters, that's included. There isn't a space included for you to write in Arabic, so if you wanted to include that, you could either take a few sections of your lines or you can get a separate piece of paper that and also there's an activity that comes in 3 times in each level where you can write the names of Allah to make a memory game. So you can write the name and the kind of the translation of that name or the explanation of that name. And if you choose at that point, you can write all of the names in Arabic. So you can see that the copy work gets a little bit more extensive. We need 2 lines for this one. And while there aren't too many other pages that require, or rather there aren't too many other weeks that require several lines, you're going to see that come up a lot in year 2 and especially in year 3. So this is going to go through the same format for the first 11 weeks where you're covering the first 11 names of Allah. They may not be in a particular order that you're used to, but I did try to follow a convention that, or an accepted convention for the order of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so you can see that by week 8, you're needing 4 lines to complete your copy work and your dictation. So let me take you to week 12. And this is a break in the curriculum to do an activity to help memorize the first 11 names. And this is where you can do your own little memory game. You can cut up little pieces of cardstock, write the name, write the meaning of the name, you flip them over, and then you try to match them up. This game is offered every 11 weeks throughout every year, so that by the time you're done with the first year, you have 3 memory games and you've covered 33 of the 99 names. And in this way, we can get through all 99 names after 3 years of doing this program. After week 12, it goes back to the regular format with the copywork and the dictation. And you can see that by the midpoint, the dictation and the copywork are quite a bit more lengthy. A lot of the words repeat for level 1, and in some cases, I've used the same ayah, but I've extended it as we go along. So if you look at week 4, for the name Malik, you have he is the king. And then for week 5, it's a continuation of that same ayah. He is the king, the all-holy. And by week 6, you have he is the king, the all-holy, the all-peaceable. This is all done on purpose to have that repetition and also to grow in those sentences that are becoming longer and longer. And so by week 7, you have he is the king, the all-holy, the all-peaceable, the giver of peace. And in this way, the child can easily memorize some of those more challenging words because they've been repeated, because these are really, in some cases, long and complicated and complex words for a young student. So to see that repetition is going to really help them. This is not a spelling program, so you're going to find words that are probably junior high level in level 1. So assist your children as needed. And then by week 8, you can see that it's that same sentence, but we keep adding on as we include the other names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that doesn't happen throughout the curriculum, but I did want to point that out, that if you saw a lot of repetition early on, it is purposeful. Okay, let us continue with level 2. And level 2 is the same as level 1, where you're going to get the teacher's manual, and it's going to have the same format where the first 11 weeks are copywork and dictation, and then week 12 is the game, and then you go back to doing that for another 11 weeks, and then you'll have another game. Okay, so for level 2, the differences now are that the lines are just a little bit smaller, not by much, but just a little bit. If you find that these lines are still too big, you can use a separate notebook to write out the sentences. For level 2, you get 2 verses from the Quran that mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You also still get the calligraphy as well as the Arabic text. It's the same format with the copywork coming first, but you can see that the copywork's a little bit longer and more portion of the verse is used, or verses that have more content is used in order to create the copywork and the dictation. So you can see that for most of the copywork for level 2, you're going to need 2, 3, and in some cases 4 lines in order to write the sentence, which means it's going to take a little bit more effort to memorize these sentences by the end of the week. So just be mindful that it may be a little bit more challenging by the time you get to level 2, and you may need to assist your children a little bit more. Level 2 is designed for years 2nd grade through 4th grade. I always put an age or a grade range on the curricula that I make because I think that it can service multiple grades and multiple ages, and I don't really believe in just doing something for a particular grade when it comes to this kind of work, or when it comes to unit studies, or when it comes to a lot of other subject areas. So the teacher manual is going to be exactly the same as year 1 in the beginning pages when it talks about how to use the curriculum. The differences are in each of the lessons. These lessons are going to coordinate with level 2. The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be in calligraphy. Once again, you're going to have the Arabic text. You're going to have the same verses that are listed in the child's workbook. You're going to have the name of Allah and the meaning. Now, there are many different ways to translate the meaning, and I want to just say this is a shortcoming on any language that you're going to be translating any of the Quran or the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if it doesn't look recognizable to you, just know that there can be several ways to define those names. And in some cases, I include multiple names, but for simplicity for the child, for the most part, I just include one name that translates from the Arabic. You're going to have the copywork. This is the one thing that you definitely want to keep the teacher's manual handy for, which of course you can just leave it on your computer and refer back to the sentence rather than printing out the entire student or the teacher's manual. You definitely want to print out the student manual, so make sure that you have access to a printer or a printing service, because this is not something that you can do on the computer. You can reference this from the computer, however. And so what I did as I was working along with my children is I recognized that looking over their shoulder to find out what the copywork was and memorize it myself and then have it covered while they were doing the dictation didn't work. And so I created the teacher's manual to go along with it. So it's a lot easier for you to have something that you can refer back to and keep track of the weeks and where the students are going. I love to add a little note of when we're going to be covering certain lessons and just use it as a lesson planning tool as well. So you can then use this sentence for your child's dictation. And then when it comes to memory work, if they can't remember the sentence for that week, then you can definitely help them out because you will have the teacher's manual available. Let's move on to level 3. I've color-coded each of these levels so that they in some way represent the colors of the classroom in a Waldorf setting. Now, we are Waldorf homeschoolers, but you'll notice that Copywork and Dictation in this format isn't very Waldorf inspired. And that's okay. You can change this and make this a lot more Waldorf inspired. I'll explain how to do that in a little bit. However, the colors for each level represent in some way the colors that you're going to see in the classroom. For grade 1 and 2, you have the warmer, rosy, pink and red tones. You move into the yellows and the golden oranges, into the greens and the blues and the cooler colors as the children get older. And so I've mimicked that as well with this curriculum. There's quite a big jump between level 2 and level 3 in that the sentences get quite a bit lengthier. The lines are smaller, but you can see that they're still fairly big compared to notebook paper lines. So again, if these are still too big for you, definitely use an extra notebook on the side. But for the most part, each of the levels, the lines get a little bit smaller from level 1 to level 2 to finally level 3. Level 3 is a great time to use a fountain pen. I recommend using the fountain pen with the copywork, but not with the dictation. Even though our fountain pens come with erasers, I find that it's a lot easier for us to use pencil for the dictation because it's a lot easier to erase, and I think it's a little bit more comforting for the child to feel like if they make a mistake, it's not a big deal, they can erase it, rather than working with a fountain pen and being a little bit anxious that they might have to cross things out or use the eraser with the fountain pen and maybe it doesn't erase all the way. For level 3, you can see that you now have 3 verses to choose from. A short one is always included, and then some lengthier ones are included as well. Now, we're always using verses in this curriculum, but on a couple occasions, there are some hadith that are mentioned, and I just want to point that not every single one has an ayah or a verse from the Quran. So now you have 3 ayahs or verses to choose from, and the one for this particular one happens to be pretty short for the very first example, but it gets lengthy almost immediately. And you can see that these are quite long with more complex grammar and punctuation, and that's something that we want to be mindful of as we're working through the curriculum, that we're striving for ihsan in every lesson. We want to make sure that the handwriting is neat. We want to make sure that the punctuation is correct. We want to make sure there are no spelling errors. Now, these lessons are really short, but by level 3, I would say they take less than about 15 minutes versus level 2, which takes less than 10 minutes, and level 1 taking less than 5 minutes. So as you progress, it is going to get more lengthy. However, overall, these lessons are all really short. So we want to strive for doing our best work, especially with these short lessons. This is not something that we want to race through, especially if you forget to do one of these lessons one day. We don't want to double up on these lessons because part of doing the dictation is that it follows an entire day after you've done the copy work. If you did the dictation right after you did the copy work, you're not calling on your powers of memory and exercising the ability to memorize and really visualize those words in your head after a period of time, especially after you go to sleep. This is definitely something that's important in the Waldorf curriculum, is that, and again, this is not, but you want to make sure that the child is sleeping between lessons, because a lot of internal work, brain work happens when the child falls asleep. So you're not going to get the same value if you go through all these lessons in one day. And I know that that can be enticing to do. You might want to do that because the lessons are so short. I do recommend that you spread them out and you don't double them up. Now, sometimes this requires us to do a lesson on the weekend if we didn't get to it during the week. Now, if you really need to double up on a lesson, I recommend that you do one lesson in the morning and then one lesson in the afternoon. Now, suppose you get really far behind because your child was sick or you forgot or something happened. If that's the case, then I would recommend this. On day one, suppose you're an entire week behind. On Monday, let's say, and by the way, none of the days of the weeks are written in here. This is so that wherever you are in the world, however you homeschool or educate, or if your child is in school, you can use this without having to go with the schedule that I've provided. I've just designed this for a 5-day school week. So suppose you're an entire week behind. For day one, you can say do week 7, and at the same time, you can do week 6. And so you can double up in that way where you're doing 2 copy works, maybe split them up throughout the day, but you can do 2 copy works in one day of different weeks. And then the following day, you can do 2 dictations. And that way you can get caught up in that week if you really fell behind. And I think that that's completely suitable. Okay, so how could you turn this into a more Waldorf approach rather than more of a classical approach? Because the way that this is written is a lot more of a classical approach. If you like the content and you want to make this more Waldorf inspired, I would recommend either using these same sentences or using sentences that are derived from your main lesson for that week and creating your own copywork and dictation to follow that week's lessons. I still really like doing the 1 week focused on one sentence, but you certainly can just do a 2-day cycle where you're doing copywork on one day and dictation on the following day, and then move on to a new sentence by the 3rd and 4th day, and leave the 5th day blank, or leave, say, the middle day of the week blank without doing copywork and dictation. I like the 5-day schedule because it gives the opportunity for the child to memorize the sentence and also write the sentence from memory on the final day of the week. So if you wanted to have this be also more Waldorf inspired, we would do away with the printed sheets and you could get a main lesson book and you could create your own lines, or even better, leave it completely blank and the children can practice making sure that their lines are straight, making sure that their letters are all proportional, and this would be of such tremendous value for the student as well. I know that it's a little bit more challenging, but being able to arrange the letters in a blank space is actually a wonderful exercise, not just for the academic part of it, but also for the spatial part of it and for the relational part of the exercise. So especially when a child is in grade 1, that child is looking for their place in the classroom or identifying their place with their friends or in the home, and working on doing that in a physical sense with pen and paper or pencil and paper with dictation and copywork, trying to arrange the sentence within that blank space actually is an exercise that mimics what they are doing in reality. So having a blank main lesson book, writing these sentences or sentences that you create on your own is of tremendous value, and I highly encourage you to do it, even if you do it as a companion to this curriculum. The best way to use copywork and dictation in the Waldorf setting is to derive those sentences from the work that you are already doing for that week. Now, these sentences are all derived from Quranic verses, and so this would definitely complement using an Islamic approach, or maybe some lessons that had to do with the Sirah or the Sunnah, and that way you could definitely use these sentences in conjunction to your main lesson. Another way to use these sentences that go along with your main lesson is to use the entire curriculum the way that it's laid out, with the different sentences in this order, but use these sentences as a way to start the week. So instead of choosing an opening verse, you can use this verse for your opening when you're starting your school week. So Monday morning or day one of your school week, you can use this verse, and then you can recite it orally every day as your opening, and then that way it will coordinate with your copywork and dictation for that day and for that week. And I think that's a lovely way to include that as part of your opening activities, and then it relates back to the lessons. Okay, so Year 3 again goes through the same format. So every 11 weeks, you're going to have a break in the curriculum for you to do the memory game. And by the time you get through level 3, you'll have created so many cards, you'll have covered all 99 names of Allah. Okay, so again, you have more verses to choose from. So if the sentence provided isn't one that you want to choose, you have more content so that you can create other copywork if you so choose. Because you have the ability to download this multiple times or to print out multiple copies, you can use this curriculum for all of your children, or even if you have multiple students, and that way you it's a little bit, it's actually a nice value that it's as a PDF digital download. You're not getting an actual physical copy. I do recommend binding them. It'll be a little bit difficult with all the loose sheets, and you can take that over to an office store to have it bound, or you can use your own binding machine if you've got one available to you. Okay, and then this will just take you all the way to the end of this year, and you can see that pretty consistently you're having several lines in order to do the dictation and the copywork. The sentences do get quite lengthy, and again, there's quite a bit more punctuation. There's dashes and semicolons throughout the copywork for year 3 or level 3 rather. Once again, these levels are by grade levels, by ranges, not by a particular grade. So when it says year 3, it's not intended for 3rd grade only. You can start it at 3rd grade, but you can also start it at 4th or 5th grade if you started copywork level 1 with your 3rd grade student. And for our purposes in our homeschool, I would not have given this to my 1st grade child, like level 1 to my 1st grade child. I might have abridged it a little bit, but this is working really well, and my daughter is 9 and we're still starting with level 1. So just remember that you can have a range of grades, that when you see this, it doesn't mean that this is going to be content enough for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Each year has 36 weeks of 5-day lessons, and that is the traditional year, at least here in the US where we are homeschooling. Once again, every level comes with a teacher's manual, which is really similar year by year. The differences are just in the sentence content for each of those lessons. Okay, so if you are interested in getting this curriculum, I highly encourage you to head over to my website at pepperandpine.com. You can find all the links down in the description box below. It'll take you directly to my website where you can see more images and more of what each of these levels contains. The product pages have a lot more information as well. Hope that you enjoyed this, and if you end up using this, please let me know. You can also find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.